And without further ado, we'll have Jean come up.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm Jean Miller, and I had the opportunity to go to Kenya last February. This was through Mary Ann Fraizer. I don't know if anybody of you know Mary Ann. Let's see here. Yep, there's Mary Ann right here. Met Mary Ann at EAS in 2017. She's out of Penn State and has been going to Kenya for many, many years with grad students to help do research about beekeeping in Kenya, what's the problems and such. Her colleague over there is Dr. Iliad Muli. They go by last names Muli, so they're buddies, and they were pretty much our main tour guides. But when I met her at EAS, she was, the very last day, she did a presentation on beekeeping in Kenya. I had just come back from Kenya and Tanzania to see like the big game and stuff, so I was familiar with the country, more on the animal side, but I really didn't get a chance to go into beekeeping because that really wasn't the emphasis for that first trip. So at the end of her presentation, she said, by the way, I'm going to take some educators, like teachers, and beekeepers for the first time, February 2018. If anyone's interested, got in contact with me, so I did, and I was one of the 15 that went with her. So those were our guides. This happens to be Kalonzo. He's one of the technicians that helped out, and I have to give thanks to not only those three, but also Steve Rapaski. Some of you may know him. He's an EAS master beekeeper out of Pennsylvania. He happens to be the Pennsylvania president of the Beekeeping Association there, and he's out of Pittsburgh. He was a wonderful photographer, so a lot of thanks to those three. So without further ado, let me go into a little of the honey history and culture in Kenya, beekeeping. Now, as we all probably know, Apis mellifera, I'm not sure however you pronounce it, we think originated in Africa. So beekeeping or honey harvesting has been happening in Africa longer than pretty much anywhere else. And they have a very rich and diverse history. Hives typically, at least in Kenya, were constructed out of logs about 3 to 6 feet long, and the diameters vary maybe a foot to 18 inches, depending on what the hive maker could find. Now, also historically, and also kind of modern to a point, it's really been a man's job as a beekeeper. The skills were passed down from grandfather to father to son, and it was really considered taboo for women to climb trees, and that's really where they usually hang their hives, in trees. So women beekeepers are quite rare in Kenya. There are a few, but not many. Honey, like in a lot of other cultures, played an important role in medicine to treat wounds and coughs. It was given to women after childbirth to help prevent colic in their infants, all sorts of things. Of course, it's used as a sweetener, and it's used to make honey beer. In Kenya, there are many, many tribes. Like in Kenya, if you're a Kenyan and you meet someone else, the first question you have is, what tribe are you from? It's very tribal, and not in a bad way. That's just how they identify them, first as a tribe and then as a Kenyan. Whereas we as Americans tend to say we're an American first, and then maybe we're from the Northeast or from California. They view themselves more as I'm a Maasai, or I'm a Kamba, or something like that. Honey also is part of the bride price, or has been. Whenever a daughter gets married, the future son-in-law pays off, I don't know if pays off the right word, but gives money in the form of various things to his future father-in-law. My guide earlier, my first trip, his daughter's getting married next November, and he was given 4 goats and 4 cows already. And he's a modern-day Kenyan. He's not someone like a warrior type. He's a modern-day Kenyan, but they still do that. They often offer gifts in the form of cows, goats, honey, things like that when a daughter gets married. Wax was generally discarded. It wasn't really considered a commodity. But the bee brood was believed to improve men's libido. So that's, the men of Kenya historically have eaten lots of bee brood. I don't know if it works, I didn't ask, but honey is also used to prevent hoof and mouth disease in cattle in some of the tribes. The reason why I put little asterisks here is Some of the indigenous knowledge of beekeeping had been lost in Kenya, and that happened when the missionaries came over. The Christian missionaries came over to convert the Kenyans from their traditional religions, and they did not like that honey was being used to make beer or was used to pay the bride's family. So there were many beekeepers that Mary Ann interviewed where their grandfathers were beekeepers, but their fathers weren't, because the missionaries didn't like that, and they then, when they became Christians, stopped becoming beekeepers. But some still continued, so that's why some of the indigenous knowledge was lost in certain areas. But there are a lot of organizations that are continuing to learn more, but to bring it back, let's say. Not just about honey, but also about medicinal plants and things like that. So, what do African bees do? They don't stick around in one hive all year like ours do. They migrate. This is to me, this was the biggest difference between beekeeping here and there. When the going gets tough, the tough get going, meaning when the situation is not good for bees to get forage anything, they just scram. Their main form of foraging are acacia trees, and there are many, many, many types of acacia trees in Kenya. Like there are many types of, say, maple trees here. We have several types of maples. They have tons of types of acacia trees that bloom at different times and in different locations, because Kenya has mountains, they have savanna, they have coastline, they have all sorts of stuff. So swarms are really the sole source of bees for the Kenyan beekeeper. They bait hives to attract them when it's swarm season. They don't go and call Stan and say, hey, bring me up a package. So they rely on swarms. And this is their typical weather patterns in the savanna area. Like I said, they have different zones, but in the savanna area where we were, October through December is their short, cool rains. That's when they have migratory swarming. That's when the natural reproduction takes place. And that's when they have hives out baited. We'll talk about how they bait later. And a little bit of harvesting is done. January and February is hot and dry there. Remember, we're right near the equator. March through May, that's their major nectar flow. And that's when they'll harvest in June. And in July and September, we get hot and dry again. And that's when absconding takes place. They just up and go. Do the beekeepers worry about that? Yes. No. The Kenyan beekeepers are not concerned at all when their bees abscond. They don't care, because simply they know they will come back when the foraging improves. Doesn't bother them. It's the cycle of beekeeping there. Very different from ours. Now, the selling price of honey and wax to beekeepers is, we consider pretty cheap, but it goes for about $1.36 a pound. That's the honey. It's in Kenyan shillings is what they use. And but they actually had floods this summer, but prior to when I went, it was very dry, and the price pretty much doubled to $2.72 a pound for honey. Whereas wax, that varies greatly. They're starting to learn that wax can become a commodity, but it was as cheaply sold as 32 cents a pound up to $2.72 a pound. And this was as of February. Swarming and absconding. The bees do swarm. They do it much more frequently than ours. That's another difference. Our bees tend not to swarm as frequently. They put a lot of their resources into swarming because they don't have to overwinter. There's no winter to speak of there. And they do abscond, usually for two reasons. One is lack of resources. When it's hot and dry, they up and go to some other place where they hopefully can find foraging material. I asked how far do they go, and they really don't know, but one guy said, I think, they can go up to 60 miles. Don't quote me on that, but they really don't know how far they go. And of course, they are easily disturbed. Basically, as soon as they harvest honey from them, they're going to move. The way we go into our hives so often, their hives would be absconding all the time. They don't like to be bothered. The bees in general, if you look at them, you can't tell by this picture because I don't have one of our bees beside it, but they're slightly smaller than ours. Their colonies are definitely smaller. They're equivalent about 1 deep, and they will migrate long distances. The queens mature a day faster. Everything's a little faster over there. And, oh, this I found interesting. I always found my hives were most aggressive during a dearth, when things aren't nice outside. Their hives, they are very aggressive when the major honey flow is on and they're pulling in stores. They have almost a different mentality. So when the bees have lots of stuff coming in, don't mess with them over there. We're here, you know, during a major nectar flow, my bees are nice, and I think most of you will find your bees are nice. Totally opposite there. So when the stores are down, ours are mean, theirs are nice. It's just weird. So anyway, their harvesting is typically done at night. And we'll go into that later. They do it, it's a nighttime harvesting, not during, I don't harvest at night. I don't know if anybody here does, but that's the first time I ever heard harvesting at night. And the colonies essentially are not managed. And you'll see why, because of their preferred hive that they used. They don't manage, they're pretty much wild. Penn State, Mary Ann and Mooley, they did some, in 2015, they did some studies on what is the preferred hive that the bees like. So they, this is say day 1, they put out several Langstroth hives, some traditional log hives, which I'll get into later, but are basically a hollowed out log, and the Kenyan top bar hives, which some of us may know is kind of a combination of the two. It combines the movable combs of the Langstroth, which kind of the long log-like appearance, trying to get the best qualities of each. So after day 141, actually all Langstroth hives were filled. It went up to 25. They had 25 of each. The log hives were I don't know, 80 to 90% filled. So they kind of like both well. Not too happy with the Kenyan top bar hives. They really didn't care for the bees did not care for the Kenyan top bar hives. These hives were out, they were baited, you know, hoping to get swarms to occupy them. Langstroths did great, followed by the log. Not many took up, ironically, the Kenyan top bar hives. So here are the types of hives in pictures. Langstroth, this is what their Langstroth looks like. It's hung. These here are just little containers of water, because good beekeepers know they need to have a water source nearby, and if they don't have one like a stream or something, or it's a dry season, they'll put little containers with water. We'll get into this contraption up top later. I'll tell you about that. But basically, that's their Langstroths. It's usually just 1 deep with a honey super on top of their. You don't ever see 2 deeps. It's raised off the ground to prevent raids from honey badgers and other pests. You'll see a honey badger later. This is the inside of one. This actually was in Tanzania. That was the inside of a honey super, pulled the frame out. Here's your Kenyan top bar, which actually was created in Canada originally by Professor Gordon Townsend. He tried to incorporate both characteristics of Langstroth and the traditional log hive. There are also other types of hives they have. They have clay hives, stingless bee hives, other ones as well. But I'm just focusing on these as well as this one. In Kenya, 96% of the hives are not Langstroth, not Kenyan top bar hives, but the traditional log hive. That's what 96% of the hives are there, made out of. They're really pretty cool. The log hives are usually hung or suspended by chains. They're propped up amongst branches. They're hung between posts. This is a low one, suspended by cables. And the traditional, when you go really traditional, it's hung by a wooden hook. A hole is drilled through, and this comes up, and there's like a little hooky part on this branch, and it's hooked up to a tree branch. This is actually lower just for us to look at it. That's the purely traditional way, but yes, they are suspended in one way or another. He was a great guy, a traditional log hive maker named Mua Mbuvi. He was awesome. At the time when I took this picture in February, he's 54-year-old widower of 5 children, ages 5 to 20. His daughter is the eldest, and she has 4 younger brothers. His daughter was a lovely young lady. His hives come in small, medium, and large, and they run from basically $8 to $12.50. They last 20 to 30 years. Because of that, and because of their price, that's what makes them very attractive to the Kenyan beekeepers. Now, you can't inspect, so we couldn't have them here, but they don't inspect their hives over there. That's just something they don't do. He can produce up to 3 hives a day, and this, I took a picture of him right when he scampered up a tree, because he's going to lower a hive for us. He's wearing dress shoes. That's what I love. He had dress shoes on, because he was dressed up for the day we were coming to visit. He just scampered right up. Climbed up, no problems. Okay, here's his process. First, he goes out and finds an appropriate size log. So it's pretty much up to Mother Nature where he can find. The trees he prefers are called the comifera trees, and he starts out, cuts out a log, and then he hollows it out with this long knife. It's all done by hand. These are some of the other hand tools that he uses. After he has it hollowed out, he baits it. And he takes this stick, and on the end of it, it can be a combination of melted beeswax infused with smoke from, this is another bush that they use. People use different types of bait. It can be propolis from stingless bees. I'll talk about stingless bees briefly later. The beeswax can be scented with twigs of some of the species, which is basically basil. It's a basil species. Lemongrass or even animal fat. So different tribes have different types of baits they use. But basically they rub it, and you'll see the comb, if he wants the comb to go across, he will swipe bands of wax across it. If he wants the comb to go up and down the log, he'll take a long swipe. It really, beekeepers prefer different ways. It's up to them. Doesn't mean the bees will follow the bait lines that he puts in, but that's the intent. And then at the end here, they cap it. You can see it's notched, and these are just little bent nails that they use in place to hold it in place. When they want to open it, they twist the bent nails over and pop it out. So the end caps are secured with the bent nails. This is the bane of beekeepers. Unfortunately, a lot of people also want to use this wood to make charcoal. So the guys who make the hives, that's kind of the guys they're competing with, because they want to use the wood to make charcoal, and the hive makers want to use the wood to make hives. Hive. Here he goes. He scampers up the tree. I mean, it was like a minute, right, or straight up. He did put on a veil, and he had a traditional smoker, but they don't always use traditional smokers. He smokes the end of the entrance, lowers it down. This has a traditional hook to hang it, and we pop open the end cap, and here we have some old comb here, and on the other side we had new comb going the opposite direction. So this old comb was made probably from a prior colony that had been in there and absconded, and then a new colony came in and decided, let's make comb this way. You just never know what you're going to find. So this was the new comb. And this is Kilmani. He's one of the beekeeping technicians. These bees were so gentle, but this was a hot, dry season. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, we're going in like during their dearth. No, they say when they're starving like this, they're just kind of too weak. They don't fight at all. They don't put up a fight. Nobody got stung. Wasn't a problem. Female beekeeper. So that's just wanted to show you that, they thought I was kind of odd. I was an odd person being a female beekeeper. They don't have many. A couple, but not many. Oh, and that day also, these were the ladies that fed us. Like I said, our beekeeper buddy, he is a widower, but the ladies came out to help give us a nice meal. This was like a goat stew, and we always had boiled cabbage and boiled like spinach greens, and then desserts were usually cut up fruit. It was great. So we were well fed there. I'm not a big fan of goat, I found out though. Anyway, harvesting. Harvesting, a traditional smoker looks like this. Several do have our regular types of smokers, but the traditional smokers are made out of strips from the sisal plant. Kind of looks like a big yucca. There are actually farms all over the place that is used to make fibers are used for, I think, ropes and stuff like that, but the flower stalk is stripped into pieces, bound together, and lit. And a traditional smoker like that can last for about 3 hours, which is pretty good. So it's done, their harvesting's done at night. They do it with a long knife for 2 reasons. 1, to cut out the comb, and 2, because often poisonous snakes live in the logs with the bees. So it's good to have a knife on hand in case you come across a snake. The hive is smoked from a honey-laden end. They know when it's full of honey because sometimes 2 reasons. 1, it can start tipping on the honey-laden end, and also if bees start coming out of both ends, they know it's pretty full. So then they smoke it from the honey-laden end to drive the bees towards the brood. And then sometimes I've been told it is done naked. Remember, these are mostly guys. The naked beekeepers believe the bees will be less prone to stinging them because they won't get trapped in folds of their clothes. So they go at night, naked, in a tree, with a knife and a smoker sticks. So now I kind of wonder why the women don't want to do this. But anyway, they tend to gather anywhere from 6.6 to 22 pounds per harvest, and they usually harvest 2 times a year, sometimes 3. Again, it depends on where they're at. And they typically do this crush and strain method to extract honey, not the centrifuges. These guys don't have a lot of money. I mean, so they do it the way it's the easiest and then least expensive. I don't blame them. I would too. So Penn State has a recent study that's actually currently going on. They have 40 farmers participating in this study. They gave them solar wax melters so they could sell the wax and not dispose of it. The data collected on the hives is the number of hives, the height of the hives, how often the bees have gone, the type of floral resources they have, where the hives in the sun and shade, how much wax and honey is harvested, and the experience of the beekeeper. They haven't published the results yet, but asked them about the height results. The reason they did this is, remember how I was telling you women were not encouraged to become beekeepers because it was taboo for women to climb trees? Well, the old beekeepers say, oh, bees, when they abscond or swarm, they only want to go to the high logs up in the high trees. If they put them low, no bees are going to go down there. Well, this is to either prove or disprove that theory. And so far, it's being disproved. So far, they have found, I haven't published it yet, that bees are equally occupying hives at low, when I say low, it's like 6 feet, 5, 6 feet, versus 30 feet. They had different levels to basically tell the Kenyans that, women can be beekeepers too and make money off of this. It's not just not just the boys' game. Women can do it too. So they're finding that the height doesn't make a difference. That hasn't been published yet. This is some of the information she gave them. This particular graph up here is showing which pest is the most, it causes the most problems with the beekeepers there, and this is the honey badger, which we'll talk about soon. So, right now, the enemy number 1 for the beekeepers is the honey badger. It's a nasty little critter. Not really big, not as big as our bear, but kind of like a Wisconsin badger, that size. It's nocturnal, and it can easily destroy hives. Honey badgers rip right through metal covers. Their jaws are powerful. That's a cover that a honey badger went through. That's why one of the solutions was to construct this type of cage with points on it. It's a protective lid. Also, they hang this is another reason why they hang the hives, and they usually put metal around the stilts, the legs, to prevent them from climbing. Still, they can sometimes get up there. That's why you have put all sorts. It's the equivalent of our, bear fencing. Plus, other pests they have, large hive beetles. Here, this is a honeybee. This is a large hive beetle. It's bigger than the honeybee. It makes our small hive beetles look puny. So their large hive beetles are pretty big. They also have the small hive beetle. They also have some nasty ants, not like our ants. So they usually spray carbaryl, or what some people it's called 7, around the base of the trees or the support. This is some grease here on the wires to help prevent the ants from going up. Of course, they have wax moths and varroa mite. It was found in 2009. It may have been there sooner. It was found because they were looking for it. Penn State went over and they started looking for it. They first thought, oh no, we don't have varroa mite. Yeah, we do. So the only area they didn't have it at that time was in the remote corner of Kenya. So overall, studies from about 10 years ago have found that the health of honeybees in Kenya has also declined like ours. Fewer hives are being colonized. They're producing a little less honey. Why? They're thinking it's pretty much the same reasons we may have here. Loss of foraging areas, drought, climate change, pesticide use, and that dreaded varroa mite. But the African bees seem to tolerate the varroa mites better than our bees. And why is that? Hygienic behavior. They've done a lot of studies like, that pinprick tests, and they found that the African bees do tend to pull out brood that has varroa mite faster than ours. They tend to be more aggressive in the grooming. Because they swarm and abscond much more frequently than ours, you got the brood break, which helps decrease it. Lack of miticide buildup. Miticides simply aren't used because they're too costly. They don't have money to use them, so they don't even use them. Plus, they don't manage them. The hives aren't really, the log hives in particular, aren't easy to manage. Also, the African bees are genetically much more diverse than our bees. Remember, the Apis mellifera species started in Kenya, or not in Kenya, in Africa. And when you have a species, wherever that species starts, there's more diversity the longer it's been there. It hasn't been in our neck of the woods much as long. So they have a lot of subspecies, and those subspecies might be a little less harmed by varroa. So the more diverse, the better, basically. African honeybees cover the inside walls of their logs with propolis. And we've all heard that propolis is a great thing to have in your hive for the health of the hive. Not necessarily for managing it, but for the health of it. So their hives, those logs, are totally covered inside with propolis. So only 3 of the 7 viruses typically found in the US were seen in the Kenyan bee population. And that's the deformed ring virus, the black queen cell, and the acute bee paralysis. There were 24 apiaries that were tested. The only ones that did not have any varroa were up here in this remote corner. Everything else here had some varroa. And this is 2000, here's now 2014, and these are the different viruses that were detected. None actually found in this apiary. This is the apiary numbers. And none found up there, but you can see the other 3 were found in one form or another. Nairobi's like in this area, it's more, and Mombasa. We were from Nairobi to Mombasa. That's where we went. So here's what was odd. Based on when to treat for varroa mites, based on when we in the US are supposed to treat for varroa mites, 2/3 of the colonies surveyed in 2014 had varroa levels that would warrant treatment, but they weren't treated. However, the largest, healthiest had the largest levels of varroa. Well, we've always heard big colonies have a lot of varroa, but these colonies were also pretty healthy too, compared to ours. Okay, now I'm going to jump ship to a different little topic, because this was kind of cool. We went to a thing called the Elephant Bee Project, because a lot of farmers in Kenya, and there are a lot of farmers. A lot of people do subsistence farming. They might have a job, but they also have a farm, a small farm, 1 to 2 acres. And I complain about deer, the deer fencing I have to put up to keep the deer out of my garden. They have elephant problems. It's right through any fencing you try to put up. Elephants will pretty much find a way to get through it. So elephants can easily break almost any type of fence that a typical Kenyan can put up. That's a problem. A lot of them had resorted to shooting the elephants. That's a problem too, but I can see why they would do that. So to the rescue is honeybees. And elephants know that honeybees, they know the sound of the honeybee. They know if they will go after their trunk right at the tip and sting them. So elephants don't like honeybees. And there's a project going on right now. It's founded in 2009 by Dr. Lucy King, called the Elephant and Bee Project. There's 25 farmers in 2 villages that they've been given Langstroth hives, and they hang them on cables. So here's Steve standing by a Langstroth hive. There's the fence that's going around the garden. Here's a cable. And every other one is actually a dummy hive, not a real hive, because to make it a little less expensive. And what happens is, if an elephant hits the cable fence, the bees are disturbed. They come out, find out, oh, what's shaking my hive? Elephants, boom, right on their trunk, they come back. And they found it's been an 80% success rate to use honeybees to help preserve the gardens. In addition, from preventing them from destroying their crops, the farmers are given about $3.10 per frame of honey too. And they sell the honey, and it's like I said, it's a nice nonprofit. It was just a cool thing to go to. So we'll see if that grows, but that was neat. So our final beekeeper we wanted to see was a rare female beekeeper named Mama Kasika. Alice Kasika is her real name. And she has both the traditional, the Langstroths, the top by clay hives, and stingless honeybees. So we were ready to go on like a 6-hour trip, and our bus broke down. When you're in Kenya or any third world country, things are going to happen, and it's not like they have AAA around the corner or you can get another bus like this. No. This ended up being a 24-hour day and night. It was a long, long day, pushing a bus, waiting for a rescue, it was just a long day and night, but we still had fun. We had a good time. So we ended up not getting to see her, unfortunately. So the group missed one night at our last accommodation, which actually was our nicest accommodation, and we received a refund. But what we decided to do is, besides seeing bees, we did spend a day. Well, some of us, this was educators and beekeepers, spent a day at a local school, which was affiliated with one of the guys we were with, and they were just darling, the children. So we ended up giving them money to fund 2 water tanks that they collect water during the rainy season. They can drink, and also to make a lot more desks, because really their schools are so Spartan compared to ours. So Spartan. So these were just recent pictures I just got like 2 weeks ago of the 2 water tanks that were installed. Kids learn on the desks. So that was kind of nice. So we didn't mind pushing a bus all night for that. This was not a wildlife trip, but we happened to see some wildlife. We went through Tsavo East National Park, which is a nice national park. It's not like Serengeti or Masamura or Ngorongoro Crater or Amboseli. Those are really cool parks, but we saw some deep wildlife. So this is I just threw that in to show you that it's not like the squirrels and deer around here. They're a lot bigger. So we did not see the stingless honey. Well, actually we did. We did see some stingless honeybees. They're tiny, like that. They are indeed stingless. They're too tiny to penetrate anything. And there are people that keep them. A stingless honeybee hive is usually found in the wild in a small branch. Here's an entrance for one, almost like a little tube sticking out. And our hive maker had one, cut it open for us. And it is kind of a mess compared to regular honeybees. This is the mess inside. But it's treated very highly because the products from the stingless bees can command twice the price, like pollen and honey, of the regular honeybees. So although we did not get to see this lady, I got a few pictures of her. This is Mama Kasika, and this is a stingless honeybee colony hive. It's kind of like a box that folds together, and she opened it up. Again, you can see some of the comb in here, some of the brood. It looks very different from regular. So why do people keep them, besides the fact that the stuff's a lot more, commands a higher price, but there's not a lot of it. They use them for pollination of crops in greenhouses. I talked about the price there. It's also used for some upper respiratory tract infections, conservation, and they're much friendlier than the traditional African honeybees. So what can we learn? The Kenyan colonies have less viruses in the US and appear to better tolerate the varroa mite. Is it because the mite hasn't been there as long as here? These are questions we don't know the answers yet. Is it because the bees there are much more genetically diverse, and when you have higher diversity, they can withstand pests better? Is it because the brood cycles get interrupted from the migratory swarming? I'm wondering if the swarms that find new homes, are they the fittest, while the weak ones die off? So we really don't know, you know? I'm kind of leaning towards that, but I might be wrong. African bees propolis the inside hives. Does that help? They're also unmanaged, so they have no treatments, no splitting, no feeding, no inspections. Are we developing weak bees by over-medicating, feeding, splitting here? This is just food for thought. So those are the papers I used, and that was the one night we were pushing the bus. I just thought it was a pretty sunset picture. And that's all I have. Thank you. Thank you. Mary Ann is actually taking another trip, very similar to this one, hopefully without pushing the bus, next January. I'm not sure if it's filled up or not. I will be going again, not on this one because it's very similar, but she's also going to have future trips to the Seychelles Islands, the islands off the coast of Africa too. So I'm probably going to go again. The next 5 years I'll probably go again because it was very informative. That's it. Thank you.